Welcome back to Recap IT. Today we are going to recap a 2011 romantic drama movie titled Perfect Sense. When a womanizing chef and a bashful scientist fall in love, their budding romance is quickly derailed by a grave threat, a viral outbreak that causes victims to lose their sensory experience. But before we begin, please consider subscribing to this channel. Now without wasting any further time, let's begin, shall we? Susan, an epidemiologist, is the protagonist of this film. She's keeping an eye on a patient. This patient is said to have uncontrollable sobbing spells, which are followed by a loss of scent. He is completely deafeningly deaf, and there have been over 100 reports in the same case, and she has to figure out what's going on. The plot revolves around a chef named Michael. His strong skill is more towards fish, and he works at a busy restaurant. He has been extremely cooperative with one of his coworkers, James, at work. Susan tries to figure out what happened to that patient while smoking until she happens to run across Michael, who offers her a cigarette. Her apartment is directly over the restaurant where he works, as shown. The next day, she presents her findings from her disease research. As she says, there's no reason to believe it's a virus. Nothing she knows matches what she's seen, yet it's catching on with others. One by one, everyone's senses begin to fade. Each loss is followed by a flash of strong emotion or desire. People who are grieving are bombarded with all of the memories they've lost and the people they've wounded, which pours into their brain. After that, they lose their sense of smell. So that's the condition, which is known as SOS, Severe Olfactory Syndrome. Susan and her colleagues are conducting studies in order to learn more about the disease's causes. A state of emergency is declared by the government. The entire street is desolate, and individuals begin to wear masks. As Michael enters the restaurant, he notices that everything has changed. Because there are no customers, the kitchen is turned off. The entire workforce has decided to return home. Meanwhile, Michael puffs on a cigarette as Susan approaches. She refers to him as a sailor because her father referred to everyone as a sailor. He asks her to taste his cook, monkfish cheeks, which she thoroughly enjoys. Her demeanor shifts abruptly. She begins to cry as she recalls her father. He transports her to her house and attempts to console her. He sleeps with her and stays in her apartment. And then something happens, he becomes infected and begins to cry in the same way she did. They enjoy tea together the next day before going to work separately. Customers will no longer be able to taste the dish. But life must continue on, and they must consider something. As a result, the proprietor has a new idea. They come up with the brilliant notion of incorporating scents into foods, such as saffron. Michael and his colleagues begin to season the meals with extra spices. As a result, the foods will be richer in flavor, saltier, sweeter, and sour. Michael is now unemployed. He goes for a walk with Susan to get some fresh air. They come across a violinist while walking and enjoy the show. They've arrived, and they've decided to have a fling. As the illness spreads, so does their relationship, which quickly develops into love. They also have sex. She then expresses her want to be alone. He hands her his card before leaving, just in case she needs him. One of her coworkers has been infected at work. He becomes quite emotional until he is injected, at which point he calms down. Then things become even worse. As Susan returns to her car, she becomes scared and cries, "I can't die alone." Michael, on the other hand, does the same thing. He becomes concerned and imagines what it would be like if he started pissing and bleeding from his ear. "Don't leave me, Michael," his pal James screams. Everything is being messed up as a result of the SOS pandemic, which causes people to become hungry. One by one, humans begin to lose their senses, resulting in an outburst of illogical panic and anxiety, followed by a spell of frenzied overeating. This effect is only active for a short time. People abruptly turn around to comprehend what has happened. Michael sees Susan waiting for him after work and they hug. They also make passionate love. In the meantime, all they require is love. They'll go through all of the disease's transformations together, and they'll almost certainly live through humanity's final days. Their bond, on the other hand, grows stronger. He was on his way to work the other day. They're closed, according to the owner. People can't even smell or taste it. However, he tries to persuade him by claiming that people are returning to eat. So that's all they'll ever need to live. Things gradually return to normal, and life goes on. Taste fades from recollection in a matter of weeks. And fresh sensations take their place, and the kitchen is once again busy preparing new recipes. For people who are in love, life appears to be normal. As their friendship grows, so does their connection. They've spent their days together. They laugh, dance without music, and passionately kiss in the midst of the party's audience. The outbreak isn't over yet, and something awful happens. The loss of hearing follows, according to a Thai researcher, and is accompanied by an outburst of great indignation and rage. The ripple effect is rapidly spreading. People become enraged and angry for no apparent reason. The world appears to be a shambles, with fires, beatings, and gunshots all over the place. Half of the individuals, like Michael and Susan, are just waiting for their time. They utilize their time to the greatest extent possible. A restaurant where Michael works is forced to close by police officers. The local administration has issued an order for persons in quarantine to share their food. Here he is, Michael is the one who has to deal with it first, and he verbally abuses Susan by saying derogatory things. He claims she is really a pair of bottom caves. He begins to slam the door and damage the contents of the house. Susan flees in terror. He gradually loses his hearing and eventually goes deaf. Susan receives a phone call from Michael. As he explains to her over the phone, it wasn't him, but rather the disease. She then goes emotional and destroys everything in her path. Meanwhile, Michael is on the phone chatting and crying. "I adore you," he says. "Return to me." She knows she has just experienced the influence. Shortly later, she begins to lose her own hearing. The city falls silent. Looting is taking place. Some people, including Michael, find it difficult to change and continue living. The restaurant reopens, and life returns to normal. Susan begins to accept the events of the day. When she sees a photo of herself and Michael, she tosses it out. She simply forgets about him. The day becomes a month, and the month becomes a year. Every person on the planet awakens one day to a state of blissful euphoria. Michael and Susan suddenly reminisce about their time together. Susan realizes she loves and forgives Michael, and she rushes to his restaurant where he works. She's on a mission to track him down. Michael, on the other hand, goes to her residence to locate her. As he sees her down there, his eyes move. He attempts to phone her, but she, like everyone else, goes deaf. He chases her down, but she has vanished. Susan abruptly reverses her vehicle. Finally, the two find each other and embrace in the same way they did before, even as the rest of the world darkens. And this is where movie comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, until next time.